Good afternoon, everybody. Good morning for those joining in other parts of the world, and good evening as well. Welcome to the first session of a two-part webinar series called Making HR Digital, hosted by us here at PeopleForce. I am Pritul Khagram, CEO of PeopleForce. We specialize in supporting clients to select and implement people technology. Selecting and implementing people technologies such as HR, payroll, workforce management, learning, performance, and recruitment systems can be challenging, and getting it wrong could be costly. So today's webinar will focus on selection. We have another one next week, which is on the 6th of August between 1 p.m. and 2 p.m. UK time, that will cover off implementation. Each participant has been placed on mute throughout the webinar. We would like to make both sessions engaging, and therefore I would like to encourage you to post your questions using the chat function, and we will cover them off later during a dedicated Q&A session. We will also cover off some questions that have already been submitted to us by some of you in advance. There will be a couple of poll questions as well, which we'll encourage you to take part in during the webinar. Just a reminder that this webinar will be recorded and uploaded onto our YouTube channel, and we'll share the link of that on social media. So we'll send you the link of the recording afterwards as well, so you can watch or forward to colleagues or friends if you wish. So the presenter for today's session is Denis Barnard. So many of you will know Denis as one of the first HR professionals in the UK to specialize exclusively in HR and related systems, and his client list now extends to various parts of the world. So it gives me great pleasure to introduce you all to Denis Barnard.
Thank you very much indeed, Pritul. Thanks for that intro. I'd like to extend a warm welcome to everybody to come to this session. As we know, this is an exercise that's fraught with minefields. So Pritul and I are going to, in these two sessions, try and eliminate the problems if we can. So, yep, let's get underway without any further ado. I will now stop video and share screen. Oops, guy. Okay, so we'll get underway. Before we start, I'd like to give a little bit of background. This 2020 pandemic has touched everything, you know, from nations down to individuals. The people who've really had to do a lot of the hard work in this have been HR and payroll professionals who've not only, yes, sorry, one moment, from the beginning. Thank you. I'll start that. Right. So HR and payroll professionals have been struggling to keep up with the legislative changes, with a workforce that's suddenly been dispersed back to home or other remote locations. And in all of this action, we found a number of systems have actually disappointed us. In these testing conditions, what has been revealed is where we didn't implement properly, and we left things half done. We've been using workarounds, and this has all been very cruelly exposed. And in a few cases, it's actually been apparent that the wrong system be sourced in the first place. So as we move forward for this selection piece, we need to take into account the working practices which are going to prevail for the next 5 years. And there we have some big changes. So we have to take these very much on board. To actually source HR payroll systems, these are probably the greatest investments that any HR payroll professional is likely to be involved in. And in spite of all that, there's a notable lack of accessible, practical information to prepare people for this process. You might have seen on LinkedIn, for instance, people say, can you recommend me a system? Well, to guys like Pritul and myself, it's rather like saying, can you recommend me a holiday destination, or can you recommend me a car? Because it's all about what do you want it for. So you can see there's still a large area in this whole selection and implementation piece that needs to be covered off. As a result of this sort of lack of knowledge, there's been a huge amount of time and money wasted over systems that have been badly bought or badly sourced or even badly sold. Although these days, the software companies tend to be a lot more helpful because they realize having a client crying down their shoulder for 5 years because they sold them the wrong thing is not a sustainable business. Well, the upshot of all this is that generally a lot of negativity and fear about new projects. So that's something we're going to have to overcome. As I said before, our business in these webinars is to reduce the odds against making those mistakes. Now, a little while back, I posited 3 fundamental laws of HR technology. The idea behind this was to lay very firmly at HR's door the responsibility for selecting, operating, and making available to the business the HR system and its outputs. In other words, this belongs to us. It doesn't belong to IT, because IT used to make all the running in the old days, and I'm afraid their results were pretty poor. It's not a finance thing, it's very much ours. And so it's the task, in a way, of every senior HR person to make sure their organization is kitted out with the right equipment, the right software to service the business. In other words, it's our decision. We should have the final say. So, passing on, let's look at the stages in selection. I like to break it into these parts. Do I need an HR system? Basic question. How do we make the business case? What have I got to do? What's the groundwork I've got to put in to get this right? What does a product specification, what should that look like? How do I find vendors? And in your organization, it may well be you've got a tendering a requirement to go to tender. Very likely if you're public sector or a very large organization. And following on from that, in every case, we need to do a due diligence, and then the all-important product demonstrations, and finally, the decision. So, all looks very easy. So let's go to the first piece then. Do I need an HR system? Well, these are some of the main reasons why. You may not have any software currently, and you are struggling with a mess of Excel spreadsheets, paper files, paper bits and pieces. And you may have come to the point where you really can't do that anymore, or management need better information. It could be your current software is not fit for purpose. If you sourced it something like 7 or 10 years ago, there's going to be a lot of key features that are available on modern systems that you need. It could be that you bought a system way back that was probably out of scale with your requirements, either too small or too great. But for whatever reason, you need to change it. Could be your current software is coming to an end. The vendor is warming up in the wings to sell you the next iteration of that. But this is always a great time to look at the market, see what's there, and compare it to what you've got right now. And as in relationships in business, as in personal life, it could be your current relationship is somewhat frayed. After 5, 7, or even 10 years, it could be that you actually can't stand the sight of each other. And that's going to be highly increased if in the first place you actually bought the wrong system, something that became quite apparent early on, and ever since then it's been an uphill slog. You might need to economize headcount and resources, which may indicate a lot more availability of automated features in your software. And changes in organizational technology may now decree that that you go everything in the cloud rather than sitting on servers. So these are probably the main reasons, but the thing to be sure about is, do you need new software? If you've actually got software that could do the job and you're not using it properly, then that is a crime. And if you go and source new software without thinking it through, you could well make the same mistake again. So here we go. Those are the main reasons. So moving on, the business case. Now, a few things I'd like to say about the business case, because we've traditionally, as a profession, not been too smart about getting this one right. So let's have a think about it. Having established we need a new system, we've got to justify it. And that justification, I suggest putting the business case forward has to be right the first time. Once people say no, it's very difficult to get them to say yes. So you've got to get this very well researched and very well arranged to put forward to your finance people. It has to have a very solid basis. We can't premise it on airy-fairy assumptions. And I'll give you one, for example. I've seen in business cases that have been presented, if we have an absence module in our software, we will be able to reduce absence by 50%. And here are the figures of how much we're going to save. Well, that may well be true that the management has information about absence, but it's the managers who actually enforce this. So you cannot assume that having that is going to make those savings. So everything has to be very well based. The business case has to be very solid on the basis of it's got to be compelling, but it's got to be identified as a business priority. It's not enough just to get the finance director's signature on your project. You actually need to say, I need this identified as a priority, because I can tell you over the years, the number of times I've been rung up during the course of a project saying, I'm terribly sorry, Dennis, we're going to have to put this on the back burner because something else has come up. We've bought another company, or we've been bought, or we're doing this and that, and we have to put it aside. That shows me that when the business case was presented, it wasn't established as a business priority. So that's something we really need to do. And finally, in my sort of preface notes to this, there's a political element, as in all organizations. There are influences in an organization, some who are not directly affected, but will have influence. And I've seen a couple of projects get sort of held up because somebody who has influence wasn't consulted, because it wasn't thought that it affected them. So it's sad, but we need to keep that on side. Your project sponsor, who may be the HR director or somebody like that, should be able to manage those political elements within the organization. Right. So looking at the business case, one of the straightforward parts about it is to say, let's compare current costs, projected costs. So current costs of acquisition, over the last few years, the costs of acquisition of software have sort of bobbled down. There's been a lot more competition. The world's got a bit more savvy. Not only have the prices sort of come down a bit, but actually the contracts are not so draconian. You know, time was not that long ago when you were signed in for 5 or 7 years, and to get out you had to pay a huge penalty. So it's much easier now to negotiate, and you can actually show the projected cost of this against what you're paying now. Because if you bought the software, let's say 7 years ago, or even 5 years ago, you're going to show a considerable saving by switching to a newer system. If you really want total flexibility at a slightly higher price, of course, you can go down the software as a service track, which you basically plug into an existing system, but it does give you less flexibility on configuration. Hosting an IT overhead, it may be you've still got your system sitting on the servers, moving it to the cloud, having it possibly hosted by the vendor is going to save you money, because you don't need IT resource that not only is walking around feeding and watering the server, but I found in many cases there are IT people who actually have to help the HR people get more out of the system. So there's a whole saving to be made there, and you need to check with the IT department exactly how much resource they're putting into supporting your operation currently. There's time to be saved by newer systems. I've run time trials on legacy systems against newer systems, and I have found that certain standard transactions have come out 20 to 65 seconds per transaction, faster. Generally, newer software has fewer screens, fewer keystrokes to get where you need to be. Now, although that's not probably an earth-shattering statistic, if you multiply it through by, shall we say, per month, per year, and then say per 5 years of what I would deem as the life of your software, that time saved over 5 years is actually a significant piece of time. So again, there's a saving you can show there is expressed in time factors. Newer features in newer software, things like notifications, workflow, self-service, if you don't have them already, are also great time savers, and we'll see more or less how much in a minute. You're also going to save through suppression of errors, because the more antiquated your system, the more times you've had to rely on calculations and actions which are held outside of the system, moving information into an Excel spreadsheet from the system, manipulating it and moving it around like that. Every time you move between, shall we say, system and paper, you are going to make mistakes. So we're trying to get rid of those. These sort of workarounds that we're probably familiar with. Management asks for a report, you get it out of the system, but you know something the system doesn't, so you have to manipulate a whole load of stuff. It all takes time. I've been in organizations as an employee where the word comes down to get me a management report of this, that, and the other, and there's a panic for 2 days while everybody's massaging the figures. So again, this type of operation will disappear with better, newer software. And here I'll cut you into something our consultancy have been doing for a number of years. Over a rolling 10-year period, we've been talking to some of the clients we've helped over the years to see the effect of what these particular modules has had on them. So, and this is expressed as time savings over a 5-year period. And I know you're going to ask me, so how big are the organizations? These organizations have tended to be between 500 and 1,500 employees. And I'll say something else. These figures are highly conservative. So if you introduce self-service, our estimation is over 5 years, you would save the time equivalent of 5 full-time equivalent employees. And similarly with workflow, reports, triggered actions or notifications, and organization charts. And there's an added bonus that if your current system is more than 5 years old, then time saved automatically will be the equivalent of about 1 full-time equivalent. And doing up a quick bit of math will say, moving to a system, a new system, which has these aspects and these features to it, which you weren't able to enjoy previously, you are already ahead of the game by nearly 12 FTE over 5 years. So there's something you can present to your finance people and say, this is 12 FTE we could be saving. And if they're not sure about it, by all means, get them to send me an email. I'm very happy to talk them through it. But you can see the great advantages now of moving to the newer software. But there is a caveat to this. As you'll see at the bottom in red, if you've got these features already and you're not using them, then the benefit is reduced by 50%, and quite rightly so. If you're not using them, you should know why you're not using them. So, as I say, these figures are conservatives, but they will give you a steer towards where you need to be going, comparing the current costs that you've got, looking at the future savings and efficiencies you can make. There are some other factors to bring in, and maybe you may care to put them in your calculations. The slightly intangibles, but things that you might want to emphasize, the inability to produce key data for management, such as holidays, absence, headcount, exit interview, and talent data. There's also the overall effect of manually initiated systems or old systems that don't help you manage. So let's look at some of these. The recruitment experience, for example, is an area where everybody's investing more effort to make the candidate experience better. If you've got a sort of semi-manual system where everything's run on manual diaries and remember to send a yes note to this person and interview dates to that person, you're going to fall down the cracks. Similarly with onboarding as well. The onboarding experience needs to be very, very smooth for a new employee to get that halo effect for your new coming person. So this is where your new systems with their heavier degrees of automation are going to help you pull off these initiatives. You transition people through the probation, move them through induction and development. These are all key battlegrounds in maxing the employee effect and maxing their potential. And this is where new systems score very heavily because the old systems just can't cope with it. So there we have it. You need to think about all these things. The intangibles, it's very difficult to put a value on. But if you put some of these items down, they may well resonate with management. Management may be saying, we need to improve our client experience, our employee experience, and so on. So they could well resonate and help you get that all-important signature. So remember, before we move to the next thing, everything in the proposal has to be aligned with organizational aims. If it's not, HR is not operating in a vacuum. It's got to be in size and the scope of the resources of the organization and express everything in terms of full-time equivalents. That way, the finance people could put a value to it if they want. And the last thing to say is the project, when it's in and running, and you've got your new software, you better go back and say look at what you promised, because they will remind you if you haven't. And I think Pritul has a poll for us.
Yes, thank you very much, Denis. Okay, so let's all engage in a poll question, and then perhaps Denis and I can discuss the results. So the question is, what do you envisage being the most challenging part of your HR software procurement journey? The different options available is A, defining your organization's true software requirements, building the business case, C, shortlisting potential vendors, D, choosing the best fit supplier, E, obtaining team buy-in, or F, other. So if you're ready, we're going to launch this poll now, and if you can submit your results, that'd be great. Just give you a moment to vote. Okay. Right, just a couple of more people. Okay, one more person I think is being shy. Okay, let's end the poll now and just have a look at the result. Okay, let's share the result. Okay, the result is showing, Denis, that 57% of the people find defining the organization's true software requirements as the most challenging. 29% are saying building the business case. So, yeah, as expected, do you think?
I would very much say so. Yeah. I think we all know when we need a new system, but we find it very difficult to figure out exactly what it is we need, and that's quite opportune, because that's what we're coming on to now. Building business case, yes, that's a tough one. I hope that what we've given here will give some good steer, at least, towards doing that very thing. It's not always easy to get approval, but yeah, defining the true requirements. It's we think we know what it is, and many systems have been bought on that basis, and we found out that there were other things that we didn't have. So
yeah, it's what I've found, Denis, is that a lot of our clients
it is, isn't it?
Yeah, I find that a lot of our clients tend to want a sophisticated piece of technology because they feel that that's the way forward.
Yeah.
So they know that as a general objective, but exactly what they need it to do and what problems they're looking to solve, they often struggle with. So we do work with them to help them understand their own requirements, and then even go to the length of even writing down their requirements for them to then review internally and share with other stakeholders before they fully sign it off. And that's we found that's helped.
Yep, so that's about right. So hopefully everything we're doing today is going to eliminate some of those concerns if we can. Great. Okay, do I click off this poll or do you click off? I click off. Bing. Okay, right. So now we come to the hard yards, the groundwork, and this is very much about how we go about defining your organization's requirements. Number one, cleanse the data. I think everybody I've ever spoken to in the business, when I ask them what their data is like, they say, well, it's not bad. Listen, that's not good enough. It's got to be 100% accurate. And start cleaning it now. You know, go through your data cleanse exercise. Don't do what some people thought they could do, is ship the horrible data into your new system, because trust me, it's the greatest way to destroy credibility. And secondly, review your current processes and remap, and we'll look at those in a minute. Figure out what are your current areas of pain, because those are the things we have to solve. Gather all the rules together, and I'll tell you what those rules are. Think about any future need you may need. If your business is going to expand internally, it's going to expand overseas, you need to have all that factored in. So you'll need that sort of information from the upper floor, if you like. All of these things will give you the indicators of what the software must perform for you. Because the thing to bear in mind, the presence of a module, whatever it may be, is not sufficient. It's its ability to be configured. Configuration is the name of the game. From all of this information, you will be able to devise scenarios to play to potential vendors to see if they're suitable to meet your requirements. And also it will be key stuff for the selected software's consultant to come in and start configuring your system. So processes, here's some examples. These are what I would call the basic HR processes that we need to get into. We need to map them up, understand how they work, what the stages are, and who is responsible at each stage. This is going to be key for the configuring of your system, key for the building of your scenarios. So that's one part, and I'm sure that we'd be able to help you with process mapping if you ever come to need it, if you haven't done it already. The rules. The rules are the things that make the world go around. The rules are scattered across the organization in a handbook. In a cupboard somewhere. There are things like, what is the standard working week? What are the shift patterns? What's an FTE? What are the payments? What do we top up statutory payments with? What are the holiday entitlements, overtime multiples? And then there's the key bit, which are the structures of the departments. What does the organization look like in its organogram? And then within those departments, what are the hierarchies? What are the structures of grades, entitlements that attach to jobs? There's a whole raft of this information we need in order to be able to configure properly the system to work the way you want. And finally, there's things like approvals, protocols, and one I haven't listed here, but which is of profound importance, is the security profile. Everybody must have a security profile as to how much of the system they can see and action. Starting from, a basic employee can look at some of their information, well, they look at all of their information, can change some of it, personal stuff, up to sort of managerial level where they can change bonuses, pay, and job titles and so on. So another load of groundwork. You've got to accumulate all these rules together in one place. And then there's the additional considerations to be thought about. What is the technical specification that we want this software to operate in? How big is the internet pipe? What version of Microsoft Word do we want to use, and so on? How will we deploy the software? Are we going to have it in the cloud, or are we still going to go down the track of servers? And I can tell you 100%, all of the selection I've done over the last 6 years has gone in the cloud. So I think that tells you the way the world is turning. If the software has to work with, say, finance or other systems, we need to know about that. We need to know how that works and what we need to achieve with it, because that's going to be part of the specification. We need to know how many employees are going to be accommodated by the system, not only just for knowing, but actually some charging modules are per employee rather than on a flat basis. We need to know how many locations will be served and if all of those are going to meet the technical specification. So if you've got an office somewhere in Africa or South America, you need to know that they will have sufficient bandwidth to get into your self-service system. Other things you want to get a handle on what should be the deployment time. And here's a big one, which sometimes gets rather forgotten, is culture change. If you're going to start asking people to use self-service, register sick online, have online pay slips, you need to have a culture change program, a very transparent one for the employees, to explain what you're trying to do and how it should make life easier. Basic one, check capabilities of staff will be using the new system. Not everybody in the department is a whiz kid on systems, so you may need to evaluate how much extra training certain individuals may need. And last, and not necessarily least, because I've seen a few surprises, decommissioning the old software. Have a look at your contract, because there may be a horrible penalty clause in it. So while you blithely go and buy the new system, you may find your business specification, your business case torpedoed by a huge penalty charge. So that's the groundwork. There's plenty of it, and it's going to take a lot of resource. Trust me on this. You may need to backfill certain situations to be able to build this picture up, but there you are. Without it, we're going to have a problem. So, having done all that, we then move to the product specification. So within HR, these are the standard sort of modules we're looking at. And then after that, you'll be looking at the features within these modules, which are things like automated actions, notifications, multi-currency if you're operating overseas. You may want organization charting. Self-service, I would suggest, is a given. I can't think of many systems that don't offer that as standard. Workflow, moving documents around the system, that's a great one for stopping things being stuck in somebody's in tray while they go on holiday. And features such as Bradford factor, measuring the impact of absence, each absence. And if you're a specialized organization, like in higher education, you may want the HRIS statistical module. If you're in the public sector, there's a good chance you may want pay spines. And finally, automation and AI. Now, there are an increasing number of HR software vendors who've added in features such as chatbots and so on. And AI is creeping in, but only in the very larger systems at the moment. But you can take advantage of a certain amount of automation. And let's face it, we need to automate as much administration as we can. Nobody likes it. It's an area that has bogged HR down in the past. So if we can get rid of it, that would be wonderful. So from your process maps and from your inquiries, you will be able to build the product specification. And not only will you know what modules you need, but with your process maps and your rules, you will know exactly what each module should be doing. Great. Now the fun bit, finding vendors. We all love going to software shows, don't we? The best ones, certainly in the UK, are things like CIPD Festival of Work, the CIPP Payroll Professionals Conference, Global Payroll Association Conference, and Unleash, which hitherto is known as HR Tech. You could also find vendors in industry journals like Personnel Today and so on. There are dedicated websites, not that many of them, but there are some. GPA Comparison is probably one of the better examples, where you can have a look at all the vendors on show there and compare between them. You could do desk research via the internet, but that's a little haphazard because you may very easily overlook some of the best contenders out there. Or, as I'm sure Pritul and I will agree, you could contract a specialist. And there is a certain amount of merit to that, because a specialist will actually save you a heck of a lot of time of research, will guide you towards the right long list, then the short list, articulating the things you need, and if necessary, can also help you with the demonstrations. So I think it's key for you to be able to find these vendors in the right place. Too many people have gone by sort of recommendations and rather haphazard ways of finding them. So you've got to be fairly focused in your search. And when you know what vendors you're looking at, check what they offer on the sites. Are they serving the right size of organization such as yours? Don't go for master blaster systems if you only got 300 employees. Are they operating in the same countries that you are? Can you have the product deployed the way you want? Is it in the cloud? And you can use sites such as GPA Comparison to compare a number of vendors at a time. So that's where you start to drill in on the vendors and see exactly what they can offer you to see if you can arrive at a sort of possible long list. For those of you who have tendering as part of your standard procedures, you'll probably have a dedicated procurement department will handle it. Well, what basically happens in brief is there's a pre-qualification questionnaire that goes out. It's going to say something like, we are going to be looking for software. Here's some, if you want a pitch for this, here are some of the criteria you need to meet. So there'll be financial statements, health and safety policies, what are your equality policies, diversity, what's your experience in doing this before, and tell us something about the services, the resources you're going to use to help us do this. That will draw a list of responses from which you then send those that pass the filter, if you like, the invitation to tender. That's a document that will say what is the scope of this project, and you know, what is the timeline, what are the specifications. And remember, the specifications can include some of your process maps as an appendix, saying, look, we want the absence module to work like this, we need the self-service to work like this, and so on. How long's the timeline going to be? This is our technical environment, which we need your software to operate in. Or if not, what will we require to make your software work? You then ask for the responses, and up comes the responses are analyzed and the short list drawn up from there. Now, if you don't have that, you can do your own. I've got a sort of truncated process here that you could build your own. You can say, we are such and such an organization, we want to get new software. These are the functionalities and features we need, with examples from our process maps. We want to do this within a certain timeline, and we're allocating dates for demonstrations. We've got so much money, if you want to reveal, and what's the process for responding. Send 3 copies of this in a sealed envelope to X, Y, and Z by such and such a date. The great thing about this, if you haven't got one already, build your own tendering process. It gives a very a clear, a level playing field of for all of the vendors, and means that you can then make an easier comparison between them. Right. So that's tendering, and following up from there is the due diligence. Whoops, sorry about that, guys. So you need to investigate who's pitching for the business. So you need to look at what they've been doing. What is their track record in this? What are the references? Let's have some audited accounts last 3 years. Are they going to be financially stable? Are they paying their taxes? What are their aspirations with regard to equal opportunities in diversity? This is quite important to your own organization, perhaps. And we need to know who are the people and what sort of resources are going to be put behind this project. So that's just a little quick way of putting together your own system. Now we come to another poll.
Okay, so thank you very much, Dennis, so far. So fingers ready, everybody. So the next question is, when are you next planning to review your HR software systems? This will give you a good flavor as to how much legwork and groundwork you would need to do, which are some of the things that Dennis was talking about. So let's launch this poll, please. Here we go. So is it 3 to 6 months, 6 to 12 months, 12 to 18 months, or no plans to review, stroke not applicable? Okay, still waiting for a few to vote. Okay, 2 more. I'm thinking about it. Okay, so far the results are showing that 50% of people are looking within the next 3 to 6 months, and I guess this is probably one of the reasons why they're on this webinar. Again, advanced planning, I can't stress enough how much groundwork there is to do. I mean, we talked about requirements, understanding your requirements, engaging with various different stakeholders in the system, because you don't want just the HR or payroll department making decisions, because later on, if you select something that doesn't meet a specific stakeholder's requirements, then you've made a costly error there, and then you're having to make that right later, which could end up being very, very costly. So yeah, the results are showing 50% within the next 3 to 6 months, and others within 6 to 12 or 12 to 18 months. Dennis, back to you.
Yep, that's fine. Okay, right, on we go. Now the bit that everybody likes, demonstrations. I'd just like to say, if there's 2 places I've seen these projects found, the first one is usually lack of preparation. The secondly is demonstration. There's not been sufficient rigor in the demonstration to get the real information we need. Now, I put down there are 3 types of product demonstration: exhibition, in-house exhibition, in-house demonstration, and online demonstrations, which are of course now building up in force, although they can be quite tiring actually, but never mind. The location and ambience may differ, but there's a number of factors that they all have in common. The right people have to be there. The demonstration format must be very, very tightly scripted by you. Every demonstration should be scored on a consistent basis, and every vendor should be accorded equal conditions. If you're going to an exhibition, I've written length on this sort of thing about how much time is wasted because people go unprepared. If you propose to go to an exhibition, see who's exhibiting. Sorry about that. Book an appointment. Don't hang on the edge of the crowd hoping that somebody will spend 20 minutes with you. Send beforehand a couple of scenarios which you've developed from your process maps, and say, I'd like you to demonstrate these in real time, and then get the general information for price, implementation time, and have a score sheet based on the points you want to see, and then you can follow up with the demo in depth afterwards. So, but it's, oh dear, I'm just going to take a drink. It's important to structure that. It's just not good enough to go along and say, what does your product do? And in fact, that's a vendor's nightmare. So assuming you found some suitable software, sorry, clicking fingers. We now move to the in-house demonstration. I like a two-demo approach myself. I think you do need two looks at this. First of all, to have a look and feel of the software, ask them to deal with a couple of scenarios. And then the second one is to deal on key scenarios and also any pain points that you have that you need solving. And then you can talk around the general pieces such as how long, what's your project approach, what do we do next, and so on. Remember, demo are attention intensive. So the first one shouldn't be more than 2.5 hours. The second, perhaps a bit longer because you're talking about more stuff and you need the script as well. Right. Let's see. If you're doing it in-house or online, the location is important. It's got to be light and airy. You don't want people falling asleep. If the demonstrators need special equipment like OHP or they need an internet connection, make sure that's all in place. Get the right attendees. And who are the right attendees? Well, they'll probably be your project sponsor, some money people, some people who are not directly affected by the outputs from the system, and then most important of all, the users. Users are going to tell you whether or not they can work with this stuff. The subject matter will be your scenarios, and then there'll be an evaluation sheet, which we're going to look at now, and any other considerations that may pop up due to your own requirements. Rather like house hunting, if you've ever been house hunting and you see 4 or 5 houses in a day, nothing sticks. And not only is it very tiring, but don't try more than 2 in a day, otherwise it all just fuses together into one great demo. It's far too much to take in. So the score sheet, which we're going to look at a real life example in a moment, you can use it to evaluate things: user appearance, navigability, presence of the modules, can it be configured to your needs per the scenarios, how they were handled. And you could say the scenarios were handled such as demonstrated, partially demonstrated, not demonstrated, and give points to each one, and you can give weighting in areas where you have the most need. So looking at the score sheet, I'm not going to go through it all bit by bit, but these were taken from an actual one for points which were important for this particular client. Scores were given and weighting as well, as you can see under the maximum score bit. So you'll see that the demonstration is being scored all the time. That's why it's so intensive a process. And there are a couple of scenarios I built up which you can refer to. Again, we won't work through them, but you will be able to look at them at your leisure just to show. So this one shows how a workflow works. Voice is disappearing slowly. And here's one for reporting and one for the system itself. So there we are, score sheets. Get those together with your costs, your timeline, all the information you've got from your vendors. So you sit down and it's time to make the decision. Just bear in mind, there's no 100% perfect fit. You may have to compromise. Don't think about customization, it's configuration. Customization means drastically altering the software, and that's very expensive. And if none of the products come close enough, then look at your criteria. Are you being too picky? Most modern software is highly configurable. And last factor, 1 minute. The last factor, sorry about this, the old voice, it's been a bit dry. Do you have the right chemistry with the vendor? That's important because you're going to be working with them for a long time. And although it's not a thing you can put a handle on, you get a gut feeling about whether you can deal with these people. So just to summarize, find the right modules, but are they configurable? And you need to feed the software with scenarios to understand how it's got to be configured. To get the scenarios, you've got to do a lot of homework, hard yards, groundwork, demonstrations to be tightly scripted. You've got to use the score sheets. Price and implementation time are both equally important. And so good luck in your quest.
Okay, thank you very much, Denis, for that.
Sorry about the voice.
That's okay. I thought I was going. I thought I was. I might have to take over. So
yes, presenter expires, isn't it?
Yeah. Okay, so thank you very much for that. That was really good insights there, and explains a lot of the challenges that you experienced during this journey, essentially, which I think is very important. And not a lot of people understand the ins and outs of some of the challenges that you go through during a procurement process. I mean, it's no different to, I don't know, buying a car, for example, or buying a house. You know, buying a car is, you know, you need it to get from A to B, but, you know, what are the specs you need? You know, are you looking for a Rolls Royce? Are you looking for a Ford Fiesta? It doesn't matter. It's all part of the process, and HR systems, payroll systems, or workforce management systems are no different, really. You've got to get the right one for you as an organization. Okay, so I've had some questions that came through, so let's just try and just conscious of time, so we'll just cover these off very quickly. What number of employees should I have before I need an HR system? Very good question. What do you think?
Okay, my thoughts on this, and this is all very highly subjective, I'd say you need a payroll system the minute you've got more than 10, otherwise you've got the hard work. I would say an HR system once you rise to about 40 or 50 people. You could probably survive with Excel spreadsheets up to then. And if you're a very small organization, you may not have very sophisticated management requirements. But beyond that point, I'd say yes, to make life easier. About 40, 50.
Yeah. I mean, I suppose with payroll, sometimes people are just outsourcing payroll, especially if they're quite small. So it's, again, one of those things, 50 people plus, I think I'd completely agree with you there. And there are some really good low budget systems out there as well. That
definitely.
So if people think that it's a huge cost, if you're a small organization, not necessarily, you know, you can pick up systems.
No, you're right. There's lots of sprung up, really good ones.
Yeah. Okay. How long should I allow for the selection and implementation of my new system?
Okay, well, it will depend on the complexity. Let's work backwards a minute. Unless you're an incredibly complex organization, I would say a maximum time nowadays of installation, providing you're fully prepared with all the work that we've said here, should take not more than, say, 2 or 3 months. Implementation times have come down very quickly, mainly because it's, you know, companies no longer want people sitting around in their offices for 9 months configuring. So I'd say around about that. If you're a more complex one, I would say probably no more than 6 months. That's for implementation. To do all this groundwork, you know, again, that depends, but I wouldn't say, providing you've got the right resources and people to work on it all the time, would be no more than a couple of months getting your process maps and everything worked out.
I suppose with implementation, and we'll focus a little bit more on implementation next week, but I think the thing to bear in mind is that what a provider tells you an implementation is and what the reality is in terms of the internal activities are two different things. So there's a lot of internal activities that you as an organization would need to undertake, and we'll focus a little bit further on that next week. Okay, so I think those are the questions that we've had through earlier on. So in the interest of time, Denis, I'd like to thank you for presenting today. What we'll do is I'll do with you our contact details. So if anyone wants to reach out to Denis or myself, our contact details are now on the screen. Just a reminder also that next week we've got the implementation webinar. So if you haven't registered for that, we'll put the link on the chat function now, and you can register or forward it to your colleagues. That's at 1 p.m. till 2 p.m. next Thursday, 6th of August, and that will focus on implementation. Also, another thing just on the contact details, we've created a YouTube channel called Making HR Digital, so please do subscribe to that as well. We'll actually be posting this video on that channel as well and sharing that. So we encourage you all to forward that to colleagues and friends and what have you. So yeah, Denis, thank you very much for that. Thank you to everyone that asked questions and submitted questions in advance. As I said, our contact details are on the slides. In the meantime, if you'd like to ask us any questions afterwards, feel free to drop us an email as well. And that's it for now. So all that remains for me to say is thank you very much, everyone, for joining. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening. Have a good day.
Yes, thanks very much indeed. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.